Welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. We bring you the right information to empower you, the SME entrepreneur. Tonight on the show, we're talking about branding and marketing for entrepreneurs in a digital age, how and why SME entrepreneurs should look at digital, social and technology when it comes to furthering their businesses, and some insights from India's best-known social media influencers. Take a listen to some of the key highlights from that panel discussion. Thank you all very much for being with us here today to really talk to our entrepreneurs about why digital marketing, why social media marketing, why influencers like yourself have become so crucial now to businesses no matter what industry they're in. So it's exciting that we have a fair mix of influencers as well as a digital marketing agency to really talk about some of the trends that we're seeing in India right now. And I want to start in no particular order, but maybe I'll start with my right to really understand what led you to, to become a blogger, to become a social media influencer, to become a YouTuber, to really say that this is an industry that's growing in India and I can make money?
So this was happened 3 years ago. I was a chef earlier. So I used to work on ship, then I came to Mumbai. Used to travel here and there. Sure. But by someday I thought maybe I should do something which I always wanted to do. I always wanted to get into content, and that time I had no knowledge, no one to guide me, how it goes ahead. But Instagram was a platform which actually helped me, how do I go ahead with that? And 4 years ago, there was nothing called influencer. Yeah. But slowly, people got into that line. And now today, the competition is so much that we have a lot of content creators, and you know how it goes,
Sure, so, okay. Yeah. So we'll talk about how to differentiate yourself also. But let me come to you next.
Right, so my story is a bit different. I am an MBA in finance. I started my career with CRISIL, which is a credit rating agency, and I used to rate structured finance securities. While I always had a passion for fashion, I never had an outlet, right, where what to do, how to go about it. So I just started blogging, putting out my content out there, and I used to work on the weekends to just, put the content out there. But till the time it didn't make sense for me, financially, and till the time I started monetizing my content is when I actually gave it full time and I started working on it. It's actually this Jan.
Sure.
When I took it full time.
So it's been a year since you've been doing it.
Yes.
So, food has always been a form of entertainment in our country. If you look at 4 key drivers that India talks about, it's Bollywood, cricket, religion, sure, and food. So I think food kind of has always been on the top when it comes to entertainment. I think it's through this whole digital activation, the digital world that has come to existence, that people like me got an opportunity to voice their love for food out to people and share their knowledge with communities. And I think especially with the food becoming popular on TV, it was, I think, a transition from it kind of spilling over to digital, and now it's become like a full category in the digital world, where I used to be somebody who used to do TV shows as a chef, and now I only focus on digital mediums to not only promote myself as a talent, but also to run my own business, which was born on Twitter. So we'll talk more about that.
Sure. So you run your own digital marketing
Correct.
agency, Vinay.
I think for us, it's more about, all the amazing work that these influencers do. For us, it's about working with brands and helping them actually sift through all this, madness in some sense, help them actually leverage content creators like these. Just in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge jump in, how influencers, content creators have started to grow. And it's primarily starts from the place that, people are spending so much time today on these products, and as a result, content creators have so much to create for, and it's about how the brands can actually come in and leverage all this, right? So that's the place that we come from.
Okay. Is it possible to maybe put a figure to just how large this industry is in India? To say that this is how much it is and this is how much it's growing? Any credible figures we have?
I think in terms of spends, India is closing in on about 13,000 crores digitally. All right. As far as influencer spends go, it's still something that's hard to put a number to. Globally, I can give you a number that we're estimating in about 2020, we'd be at about $5 to roughly $10 billion of influencer spends, which would typically be, about 6 to 7% of the overall digital advertising budget globally. So that's a significant number. In India today, it's a very thin line between influencers, celebrities, because in India, like he mentioned, right, Bollywood is still a huge part of it. Cricket's a huge part of this. So influencer, celebrity, in some sense, on the brand side, do get a little bit mixed. So it's hard for us to put a number there, but nonetheless, 13,000 crores is a huge number, expected to be about 20,000 crores about a year and a half from now. So I think that's substantial in its own self.
25,000 crores is the kind of ad spends India Inc. did only over the Diwali season year on year, and that was a 10% growth that we've seen this year versus last year. That was the expectation, at least. And Vinay, you were just talking about the kind of spends that we're seeing on digital media. My question is that it's not just, one would presume, your emerging brands. It's not just your young entrepreneurs who are spending money. It's clearly also the big brands, and the two of you work with really big brands. You have a big brand yourself. The L'Oreals of the world, the Johnsons of the world, the Ciplas of the world are also increasingly seeing the need why they have to have this massive presence on digital and social media. How's that really changing the game for people like yourself? How's that really changing the game for companies themselves?
I think right now it's just so much content out there in terms of the fragmented content out there on internet, right? I think it's the biggest platform ahead of TV now. So influencer marketing in its own way has become one of the very important tools for brands to actually reach the kind of audience that they got to reach. The younger audience are only on social media, and it's crazy the amount of time that they spend on it. So I think it's a very, very important tool, not only for the brands, the big brands, but also for newer, younger companies who don't have big spends. This is a very, very economical tool. It's cheaper than your traditional advertising.
Sure.
So I think it's a very great avenue, I feel.
Sure.
I think if I can just step in there very quickly, right? I think from the brand point of view, one of the most important things is that where is the consumer spending time? I think it all comes down to that, right? If a user is spending, today 5, 8, 10 hours a day on their smartphone devices, of which 70 to 80% of the time spent is typically inside, social media platforms, you really want to double down on those platforms, right? As a brand, you do want to increase your presence there. I mean, if you're taking an Uber today and you're driving someplace, perhaps, you're not really looking at ads outside, right? You're obviously looking into your phones and how do I leverage that attention? For a brand, it's just about where is my consumer? How can I tap into them? And, try and drive home my message. So that's why social media, as she pointed out, is significant and it's very important. That's why the brands that you mentioned are actually doubling down, like I said, on these platforms.
Sure. Is it only the younger audiences that are perhaps looking at social media?
I think it started off like that, but it's not anymore. It's changing rapidly. It's already changed quite a bit. I think it's a misconception right now to say that it's only the youth that's sitting, or the millennial generation that kind of accesses social media, because what has also happened is that, as rightly pointed out, the traditional viewing habits have changed. Now it's every man or woman for herself, because they have their own screen to watch something on. And I think the digital world is not only limited to certain platforms, right? We also have OTT platforms now, and viewing habits have necessarily changed. And when we talk about viewing habit, it's changed throughout the demographic.
We're going to take a very quick break on that note, but we'll continue talking about what you should know about growing your business in a digital age, insights from India's biggest social media influencers. That's coming up in just a short bit on the other side of this break. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. With us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And tonight we're continuing to talk about social media and how small businesses should brand and market themselves in a digital age. Another thing that was quite interesting to me, and this is supported by data, is that it's not just something which is happening in the metros. It's not just your audiences which are based in the metros and in big cities, but it's happening outside as well. Data shows that the regional language content is set to become really big, over 275 million internet users in India, likely to go to 550 million within the next 3 years. That said, I want each of you to really comment on this. How are perhaps each of you creating content for Bharat, creating content for people who are based outside of the metros? How's that content different from what you're creating for those who are based in the metro, if at all?
I think I would, according to me, I think it's still at a very nascent stage.
Okay.
The content that is getting created is mostly in English, or now actually we're told by brands that, you know, can you create something in Hindi as well, you know, just to connect to the audience better, but, you know, use some Hindi words, don't make it fully English. But for me, I think it's still there, right? I mean, but I think there is a great potential for regional content, given the size of the industry, or size of the market in India, and the, you know, the languages that our country has. I think it has a great potential, and it will reach to a great penetration as well.
Great.
I actually think that, you know, of course, 90% of our growth, I'm very bullish on, you know, regional India being on the internet. Okay. If you come to think of it, two of the most powerful men in the country probably at this point, in Ambani and Modi, are actually pushing for a digital India, right? And today you've got, what, about 500 million people on the internet. The next 700 million people, it's a given that they're going to be on the internet. That's something that we all recognize. That 700 million people, those 700 million people rather, are only coming from those regional marketplaces, right? So I have actually seen brands starting to take this a lot more seriously. They've started to create content for regional languages. And I think there's a lot of innovation that's bound to come in. While it's developing, sure, I think brands need to innovate significantly. I think on the product side as well, you know, an Amazon perhaps would have to also, you know, innovate, because, I mean, I just come to think of it, right? Like, how do you expect someone in a tier 7 city, or a township rather, to understand that they need to click on a shopping cart to check out when they've never really been to a supermarket?
Sure.
Right? So brands really, really need to, I think, innovate. But as far as the way we look at data, we know that people who are consuming content in regional languages actually are engaging with the content a lot more, right? So I think it's a very...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think to just take away from that, it's absolutely in sync with what he's saying, because what's happening is that, and because you said Reliance, the Jio is something that's reached out to 70% of the, you know, of the mobile using or net using country right now, and it kind of enables them to watch content. Now the content also has to suit their needs. I actually belong to a niche industry, which is food, and if I had to kind of take it up regionally, we, you know, in earlier times, even on television, if I was on ETC Punjabi doing a cooking show in Punjabi, it would be more successful than me doing a show in Hindi. So I think that's where it's definitely heading already. And also I think with platforms like YouTube or platforms that give you an individual personality, what it does is that you can be a local star or a local hero by being regional. Also your chance of being successful as an influencer is fairly higher, because your community will associate with you, and community building is a essential part of being an influencer. So if you want to build a community immediately, you have to go regional.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting, you know, sorry, because India as a country, we have a habit of skipping generations, right? We skipped the landline, we skipped the desktop computer. When you look at, you know, the regional places at least, they're jumping, their first interaction with technology is actually the smartphone, right? They've never really experienced technology before. So it's imperative that content creators are actually now focusing on creating regional language, because there isn't existing content for, you know, people to actually consume there.
Sure. Saransh, I just want to come back to you and talk about the fact that you have a show where you're traveling across India creating content. So going back to my previous question in terms of how different does that content have to be when you're talking to different markets?
So that's a good question. Sometimes we also get entangled in that thought, but I majorly do Hindi content, and that keeps me universal and pan-India. But sometimes when we have an opportunity, because it also depends on the capability of the influencer. So sometimes when I talk about food from Northeast, a lot of people enter into, it's engaging because people want to know about Northeastern cuisine because it's not discovered. It's something that people don't know about. So there's a lot of value in content that's not been explored yet, or territories you haven't reached out to. So while we would have explored them on television, but the younger generation who probably does not watch television, for them all this content is brand new.
Sure.
So I feel that the more regional you go, the more deeper I go within the cities of India, the kind of dishes I can pull out from there, it makes it more engaging, more, it passes on more knowledge and makes it more relevant in the longer run.
Interesting. So you're saying brands should necessarily then look at these markets when they're creating content. All right, let's talk about the business aspect really of social media and digital media. And my first question to all of you, at least to the three of you, is it possible to make money purely by being on social media? Has India developed enough to ensure that people like yourself are able to make money just off these platforms?
I think I can speak from my personal experience, right? You have a live example, a person who had a stable, steady financial job and now moved completely and left the job to have a career in social media, to have a career in creating content. So, and given that I come from a finance background, I always wanted to just, be, monetarily stable, then just look at my passion. Like, our passion is not going to give me food or, give me stability. So, so that was very important, and I think it is possible to earn money via social media only if your content makes sense, only if your content is relatable, only if you're resonating with the brands that you work with and not working with everything that comes along your way.
Sure.
So there's another different side to it. So like, for example, I started off not for this motive, like I would actually end up making money through my social media. My motive was totally different. But slowly, the influencing campaigns keep on coming in, and later on, like after a few years, I came to know what my audience likes, and will that audience really actually relate with what the content what I create? For example, a product which I'm trying to endorse through my photos. So not really, I take up all the campaigns which come up, but I need to know my audience as well, if they really will like it or not. And that is how I go ahead.
Sure.
The audience will actually relate with your content. Otherwise, it won't be a great idea to, just for the sake of money, if you're doing it, I would say no.
You just lose them.
Yes.
Okay. So as far as businesses that are spending on these platforms, is it possible to measure ROI? How are you measuring ROI when you are working with influencers, when you're working with digital brands?
I think it's a great question, right? Because it's something that most people today, most brands are trying to find the answer to. I think it starts from the fact that you want to select the right influencers when you do start out a campaign. So you want to be very selective about who you want to work with. I think apart from all the wonderful content that all the influencers create, one of the largest reasons from a brand standpoint of working with an influencer is about reaching out to their audience, right? So you want to get a sense of who that audience is. Are they, reaching out to the right target market? Does that audience actually buy the products that you're trying to sell? So that's something that they do. So there are a lot of technology products. In fact, we've also built something where we have influencers connect onto a platform where brands are then able to assess which sort of influencers to work with. But I think coming back to the ROI piece, today or maybe a couple years earlier, we did see that, influencer marketing typically ended up with a screenshot that brands received, 60 likes, 40 comments, 70 views. I mean, does that really justify the kind of monies that brands are spending? Probably not, right? So what we've done is we've basically looked at this problem and tried to solve it in a way where we've said that, we will bucket every single campaign into 4 pieces where you're trying to assess the performance of the content. How is the content specifically performed? Which influencer worked out better than the others? Why do you want to work with more influencers going forward? On the audience side, how has the audience resonated with the campaign? What are the sort of comments coming in? Are they asking questions on pricing, availability? Where can I buy this? And then of course, comparing all of this against that of your industry. So how have you performed as against that of your competitors and a share of voice. So I think it's getting there. It's not really at a point where you can measure sales directly. Also, largely due to the fact that the platforms don't lend themselves to measuring sales today.
Yeah.
But soon enough, specifically Instagram is launching shoppability. In fact, they're already there in India. Very recently, they've launched it in India as well after doing a global pilot about a year and a half ago. So I think once those technologies start to come in, you will start to see a more closer answer to the ROI question that you posed.
Sure. My last question for all of you on this panel is any sort of best practices that businesses in India or influencers should be learning from their global counterparts?
Great. I would say that especially internationally, what I've seen is the trend now is that marketing is driven by habits. So you find out the habit of your consumer, and that's how you choose the person you would want to promote your product with. So I think that's what brands in India should also look for. I know that cricket and Bollywood are mainstream industries, but the way the global movement right now is, whatever is relevant is going to stay longer and helps to give you real-time, it helps the brand to achieve real-time growth, where they can actually, unlike in the old school mechanism where if you did a TV ad, you had a lot of rating meters from where you could try and calculate or gauge, okay, we did this ad and led to these many sales. But in the digital world, it's actually real time. You could hire an influencer, see how much product could he sell in that week. So I feel that's what the trend is. That's what brands should definitely watch out for in India, that it's not about how celebrated you are, but it's about how relevant you are.
Sure.
And I think it's definitely about quality over quantity as well. I mean, I understand the whole aspect of the KPIs and looking at the reach and the engagement, but also the kind of people that you're working with and the kind of content that they're creating, and real conversation, intelligent conversation, and not just looking good. Right, so I think that's very important. Choosing the right kind of influencers is very important. Also, I think internationally, what is happening differently is the sort of freedom I think the brands give out to the influencers to create content. They look them as partners rather than just their employees, and they just don't, give them out specific instructions to follow. You are an influencer because you resonate with your audience, and the kind of content that you create works.
Sure.
Right? But I think that's something that I think we're still a long way to go, but I think we're getting there.
I think that internationally, relationships with influencers are not transactional. It's a lot more collaborative, right? Where I think, and that's the direction I think that a lot of Indian brands are going to take as well, where it starts to move towards, instead of a one-off ad hoc campaign, it starts to become an always-on partnership that you start working with influencers a lot more cohesively and work with them for, a couple months on end to basically, try and drive that consistent messaging through to their followers. So I think that's an interesting trend that we will see going forward.
All right. Thank you to everyone who's here with us on the panel today. Thanks for your time. That's our show tonight. If you have any feedback for us, here's how you get in touch. leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com is our email ID. On social media, tweet at me personally. It's Nanda_J or LOT_ET now. On Facebook, Leaders of Tomorrow and ET Now is where you'll find us. Do let us know your thoughts and your comments and keep those coming in. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.